the World Learning Team.
Hi again, my name is Kat Hansen and I am a program officer with the Experiment Digital at World Learning. I'm really excited to introduce my colleagues on the Youth Exchange team, Kirsten, Shadi, and Callan. As some of you may know, I joined World Learning a year ago at the start of the pandemic. Yeah, it was a crazy time to join an organization, but it was also a time of opportunity to share my passion and the value of virtual exchange with colleagues that previously focused on programs abroad. Many of us have advocated for the value of virtual exchange for years, and it's been so important to reflect on how the field has grown as a critical source of connection during a pandemic. I would like to turn it over to my colleagues Kirsten, Shadi, and Callan to share their experiences transitioning our youth exchange programs in this transformative year. You can go to the next slide, please.
Great, thanks, Kat, and good morning, everyone. We have been so excited to have Kat join our team, and as she said, it was a very strategic time for us in that we were making a big pivot, and we're really thankful to have her expertise. So it's fun to get to join you all today and talk a little bit about what that process was like for us. As Kat said, my name is Kirsten French-Cray. I'm the Director of Operations and Programming for World Learning Youth Exchange. I'm going to introduce you briefly to our team and the work that we do, give you sort of the big picture, and then my colleagues Shadi and Kala are going to dive a little bit more deeply into the details for you. But briefly, we just want to give you an overview of our Youth Exchange unit and the work that we typically do, and then the work that we have done in this last year. We have been running high school exchange programs for almost 89 years, and we've been running digital high school exchange programs now for about 5 years. Part of our founding philosophy was expect the unexpected, and that has been true for us for, I would say, all 89 years, but more than ever in 2020. Our busiest season tends to be in the summer, but we do operate programs year-round. Historically, our digital programs, we had our Experiment Digital program that operates during the summer months. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that has transitioned to this year. We send students to over 25 countries around the world on our outbound programs, and on our inbound programs, we bring students to the US, primarily from Iraq, North, Central, and South America. There's some other countries mixed in, but largely Western Hemisphere, and then we have a large Iraqi program primarily our programs are high school students. We do some undergraduate programming, and then we also have adult mentors who travel on our programs as well, but we tend to have 14 to 19-year-old as sort of the bulk of our participants. Our participants come from a really wide representation of the countries that they are traveling from. We have funding. We'll talk a little bit more about our funding structure. We have programs that are funded by the US government, by the Department of State primarily, their Education and Cultural Affairs. And then we also work directly with US embassies abroad that fund our programs. And our various funders have different priorities in the participants that we recruit, but tend to want a diverse representation of the countries that they come from. We try to really prioritize working with young people who do not have previous travel experience, who often come from public schools, sort of underrepresented and study abroad, and who would not otherwise have that experience. When COVID-19 hit, we made a quick pivot from a primarily study abroad portfolio with a handful of digital programs to entirely virtual. We were fortunate that our largest funder was willing to pivot most of our programs to virtual rather than canceling or postponing, though some were canceled and postponed through last year. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We also have our fee-for-service programs, which are tuition-based programs, that it wasn't as simple as just pivoting from study abroad to virtual, but we did do our very best to sort of steer students who had enrolled in our study abroad programs into our digital programs as well. And in a moment, Kala and Shadi are going to talk a little bit more about the lessons that we learned from that. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So when COVID hit, we knew pretty quickly that we wanted to pivot our programs. But as I said, a lot of our programs are funded by the US government, by the State Department and the embassies. And so it's not as simple as us just deciding we wanted to pivot. We needed to get approval for that. So it took a lot longer to get that approval than obviously with the various levels of bureaucracy involved. It's not a quick decision. So we used that time to start building our team's capacity. We had a staff unit that was largely were on the ground programmers used to traveling with students and being face to face with them. We had Kat and our colleague Mackenzie who had the digital expertise, and we really used their experience and expertise to train up and build capacity for our full team, and to start looking at our existing digital model and how we could use that to very quickly transition a large number of programs. So we created working groups and shared resources across both our team and the greater organization to sort of build up that capacity so that when we got the green light, we were ready to hit the ground running. We also did a lot of translating virtual programs to a new audience. So funders and folks who are used to the idea that we have participants with us for 3 to 6 weeks for 24 hours a day, that sort of very high touch model, explaining what synchronous and asynchronous virtual programming means and looks like, and what's fair to expect of our participants, and sort of translating a study abroad into virtual for the stakeholders and decision makers that we work with. And then we did a lot of collaboration across the organization. World Learning is a really large organization which focuses on global education, development, and exchange. And while our youth exchange unit was pivoting programs, so was a lot of our organization. We were really across the board making these changes. And so we tried to, again, not recreate the wheel unit by unit, but really collaborate, creating an online resource library to share lessons learned across the organization, and really doing, as we have a successful digital program model already in our portfolio, doing what we could to share that expertise with the greater organization was also a big focus for us at that time. So I'm going to pass it off to Kala. If we could go to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Kristen. And hi, everyone. My name is Kala. And to give you a bit more information about what that transition actually looked like for us, because I think there's the way of saying, yes, we transitioned to digital implementation, and we want to give you a bit more idea of what that actually looked like, and what the scale was for our team, what type of programs we're working with, and what our students were feeling during these times. So in March, about a year ago this week, everyone started working from home, and we started having conversations with our funders a bit about what these programs could continue to look like in 2020, and what a lot of these travel restrictions were starting to mean for our programs. And so, as Kristen mentioned, a lot of our study abroad programs, so we work with both inbound and outbound participants, are funded by the US government. And specifically, we work with 2 primary sources of funding within that NR team, and that is the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. So that's what I mean when I mention ECA. And then we also work with a lot of directly funded programs by embassies. And so that's also a really important differentiation that I'll highlight a bit more on our next slide. But so we were juggling communications with not only ECA, but also various funders at embassies as well. And so we did submit a concept note to ECA to work with that portfolio of programs based on the Experiment Digital model, and we're able to quickly pivot a lot of those programs. But really, again, we're balancing those 2 funding sources and how there were different preferences within each program and within each embassy. And so some of our programs, we could have an overall umbrella transition from ECA, and some we needed to talk a bit with more specifically. So I'll go into that a bit more in the next slide. So this is our anticipated 2020. So this is what without a COVID pandemic, we would have been doing. And so I just want to highlight a bit across the board here. I won't go into every single program and every single number, but you can see that in the blue over here, these are a bit more of our programs that we've been running for a number of years and that really have become cornerstones of our study abroad programming with US government funds, the Iraqi Young Leaders Exchange Program. And within that program, you can see I've differentiated between which participants are funded by the Department of State, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, ECA, and which are funded by the embassy. And then some other programs have different differentiators, right? So some are outbound students, some are inbound. And then you can see as well, some of our programs over on the right in the green already had some virtual elements. So we had our Communities Connecting Heritage program, which is a wonderful exchange based in cultural heritage, and that matches organizations across the world to each other to discuss different pieces of ways that they revitalize culture and protect it within their communities. And we also have our Basila program, which is a workforce development program in southern Iraq, which does work with a little bit older youth, so undergraduate participants, and it helps them prepare for careers. And so you can see we have a really wide breadth of programming here on a pretty large scale, working across 43 countries, 38 embassies, various sub-themes, and a huge number of participants. And so we're going back to March 2020, and here we go. We have our shift, and now we can go to the next slide and look at what our actual 2020 looked like. So I've highlighted here in red, those are the programs that unfortunately did need to be canceled or postponed to a later date due to embassy preferences. Again, we're balancing those two types of funders across our team. And so you can see a huge portion of our Iraqi Young Leaders Exchange program needed to be postponed until this next summer. We'll be implementing for those 282 participants virtually, plus our 2021 cohorts. And then we also have the youth ambassadors for community service with France that needed to be postponed, and we're working to figure out the best way to work with them now. In orange, I also highlighted places where we either needed to reduce participant numbers, postpone to 2021, but it was a bit less of like a straightforward cancellation from embassies, more due to given circumstances in each country that we're working with. So for example, in Youth Ambassadors, we work with over 38 different countries. And so we're really looking at, what is the COVID situation in each country? What are participants having in terms of access to steady internet? And also to what is their school system looking like during this time, and making sure that by planning a virtual exchange, we're not setting ourselves up and the students up for undue stress and possible, just negative situations during a really hard time. But I think it's really important to highlight that no matter what programs pivoted or needed to move to a different year or were canceled, that we had nonstop programming for young people across our team in a virtual way from June 22nd until December 5th. And so really the bulk of our year last year, we were actively implementing and actively working with young people in a digital realm without really, again, as Kat and Kristen mentioned, without really having a ton of expertise across our team and really leaning pretty heavily on the Experiment Digital. We can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, the Experiment Digital has just been a wealth of resources, and of course, Kat and Mackenzie on our team as well. And so in 2020, anticipated Experiment Digital implementation looked like 655 participants on our Youth Leadership and Community Service program, which is funded by the Aspen Institute. And so we knew that program was going to be happening. That was what we were planning to do, and we were ready to have that happen. But with the pivot to digital, we were really able to find an opportunity there. And again, with a lot of programs being canceled and moved, that was an opportunity. But this in of itself gave us a huge opportunity to expand our portfolio on the Experiment Digital, which was something we've been hoping to do. But again, that was sped up in 2020 and during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so you can see that the numbers for the Experiment Digital Youth Leadership Program were increased by almost 300 participants, which was a direct pivot from some of our in-person programming from the Experiment Digital tuition-based side, as Kristen mentioned. And we also were able to add 2 new programs to this portfolio, our STEAM Discovery Lab, which is an exchange between the US and Egypt to discuss STEAM education for youth, and that's also with the Aspen Institute. And then we also have our Climate Change and the Environment program, which is privately funded and will be implemented in just a couple weeks now. And so we've added those 2 new programs to our 2021 lineup, but they'll continue to be a part of our Experiment Digital portfolio. You can go to the next slide, please. So essentially across these 2 portfolios that I outlined, we really have our Pivoted Abroad program. So again, majority USG funded and embassy funded. And then we also have the Experiment Digital. And really for our team, having these 2 models come together and be able to lean on each other and to learn from each other during these times has been extremely formative and has really opened up so many opportunities for us. So as I mentioned before, it did seem like, oh, we were, coming to the Experiment Digital, taking their model and applying it to our in-person exchanges. And that's the majority of what we did, but we did see that there was a very synonymous relationship between the 2 programs after a bit, and a lot of lessons learned and best practices started to flow really easily across the 2 realms. So as Kristen mentioned before, our Pivoted Abroad programs were very high touch in person. So it's 24/7 monitoring, our days are very full, and that remained the expectation with the majority of our funders, and is the reason a lot of embassies didn't want to continue because they felt like they wouldn't be able to have that experience. And so we were able to maintain that by keeping homestays within our Pivoted Abroad programs and really still having that cultural exchange element. And that was something we actually started to utilize on the Experiment Digital as well, seeing that that was a favorite among the participants and really wanting to again, have the 2 programs blend together and learn from each other rather than just placing one model into 2 different contexts. And so that was a really great takeaway for our team. But I'm gonna throw it over to Shadi, to my colleague Shadi, to talk a bit more about some of our other best practices and lessons learned off of the blending of these 2 program models.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kala and Kirsten, and hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Shadi. I hope no one was skeptical if they saw Shady spelled on the screen. So I'm a program officer with World Learning, also based here in Washington, D.C. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll be happy to share some of the different perspectives that we had across different units as well as impacts as well. So in regards to admissions, so ironically enough, when that whole COVID situation happened, I was transitioning from another position within World Learning as an admissions counselor, working primarily with our US outbound participants on our 89-year-old strong study abroad program. And so with the pivot and with the cancellation of these study abroad programs, as you can imagine, one opportunity that we try to take advantage of is our kind of existing Experiment Digital model. And so, efforts started right away throughout the entire admissions team to pivot those study abroad participants into our digital program. At the time, we only had 1 iteration of that program. And so, as you can imagine, this kind of news and this kind of proposal to pivot to digital was received differently. So on one hand, the educators were super excited about this, right? They kind of saw the long-term vision. They knew that they just want their participants engaged, and they knew that they are going to be stuck between 4 walls. And so they saw this as an amazing opportunity to maintain their participants' morale and encourage their learning and growth as well. So we reached out to educators throughout the country that are within our network and new ones as well, in order to promote the opportunity as we were about to increase our numbers for the Experiment Digital program that summer. In regards to participants, it was kind of mixed emotions and feelings. So on one hand, participants that were signed up for our study abroad programs that were thematically focused on the MENA region or on international relations, they were easy to sell on this program. Right? They were like, absolutely, yes, you want to put me in a digital room with people from the MENA region or with people to have dialogues and discuss, different issues about international relations in our world, absolutely sign me up. And then there were other students who were signed up for other programs that were other, that had other thematic focuses, such as, technology related or environmental activism or, along these lines. These were the students, some of them were like, yes, absolutely, sign me up. And some were like, it's not really what I had planned for this summer. And, they take their time to think about it. And of course, we made sure to, hold some alumni panels and outreach calls and meetings in order to explain the program model more and how we're actually implementing a lot of the study abroad experience into the digital experience. And again, some of that was successful in transferring these students, and some just, were sold on the study abroad experience for now. So that's for the experiment study abroad programs. We saw different, perspectives and feelings as well for our youth exchange, for our State Department funded programs. Again, as I was mentioning, these are students that were interested in dialogue and activism and community service, etc. These were also programs that were kind of easy to convince or sell on the digital pivot. And so from that feedback, we started utilizing that kind of feedback from participants that, they're interested more. The ones who didn't sign up was maybe because of the thematic focus. So from there, we started building up our portfolio. So as Scala shared a couple of slides ago, we now have the Youth Leadership and Community Service Program, which is our Urgent Experiment Digital Program. And we have the STEAM Discovery Lab. So for those participants that are interested in STEM education, in arts, then that's a good option for them. And then we have climate change and an environment for participants who are planning on going to Costa Rica and studying about biodiversity. And so we kind of took this feedback from all of the different emotions and perceptions from participants and educators and parents, and kind of use that to develop new models. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. With that, again, with so many unexpected, pivots and brainstorming and team retreats and and participants' feedback as well, we realized that this pivot also helped us as programmers, as an organization as well, to kind of get innovative with programming. And so we found that, we discovered all the advantages that digital programming can offer, and then we're already starting conversations, and some have already been implemented on how can we enhance our programming even further, right? So we talk about adult mentors and educators that Kirsten was mentioning, who come to the US and accompany their high school aged participants, or also for the outbound programs. How can we enhance their curriculum more? How can we enhance their experience more? And so we started thinking about hybrid programming, meaning both digital and both also on a study abroad or in-person kind of realms. And so we're having conversations about integrating adult mentors, creating a training session for them pre-program, pre-coming to the US or pre-departing to their study abroad destination, in order to build their capacity as adult mentors and adult educators. We also talk about our group leaders. So these are our temporary world learning staff that travel with the group in order, to just ensure their safety and accompany them throughout the trip. They go through a very rigorous and intensive training by World Learning. That typically happens on our SIT Graduate Institute campus based in Vermont for a whole week or 10 days. And so now we're talking about how can we, again, implement hybrid programming and digital programming, which can offer a plethora of benefits, right? One of which is cost savings, right? That's always in the equation here. And the other lasting impact that I want to touch on is that from this experience, we discovered that there is room for even more improved intercultural exchange between participants. And now, so with our new model, we are already speaking about mixing of our participants that are, the American participants or the US participants who would be going outbound, with the foreign exchange students that come in here, right? Typically on a program, they're not always interacting with each other or in the same cohort. But now we're talking about on a digital platform, how can we mix that? So the US youth who are anticipated to travel to Argentina and Chile are now going to be mixed with the Argentinian and Chilean students who are supposed to come to the US. Now they're both in one program on a virtual platform, which of course, again, enhances the intercultural piece of our exchange programs. So I'll pass it back on to Kala for some more impacts.
Thanks, Shadi. So one of the biggest impacts we've seen across our program has been in terms of alumni engagement. And this has been, I hope a lot of folks have felt this way, an incredible opportunity because we have more need for digital engagement and peer interaction on our pivoted virtual programs and across the Experiment Digital as well. We've really seen this as such a huge opportunity for engagement. And a couple ways we've done this is by streamlining the peer mentor role, which is an innovation we picked up from the Experiment Digital. And essentially these alumni of our programs return to the program to offer support to current participants. They plan social activities. They can comment on activities in Canvas and offer their past experiences in ways that they've now applied this information in their lives or in their projects. And so they really are that more peer-to-peer contact that we're hoping to create on these programs. There's also been opportunities for virtual reunions where alumni have come back to watch project presentations or just keep engaged with the program. And so that's been really great because those aren't in person and they're able to attend now. And then, of course, we've also, in the hopes of using these digital programs as a way to travel in the future. So some background information is that a lot of our programs with ACA or with embassies are looking to see if folks or participants who have completed a digital program in 2020 or 2021, if they remain eligible for the program, could reapply to travel with that same program in 2022, hopefully. And then we also, on the Experiment Digital, offer scholarships for participants who complete a digital program and then move to one of our study abroad programs on the experiment. And so we really are viewing these digital programs as ways to keep everyone engaged in this community, whether they're alumni or trying to travel in the future, but really seeing them as one big network that we're building off of. And of course, with the program activities too, we've seen a huge just increase in the quality and amount of exchange we've been able to offer with these programs because the alumni are able to participate. And so one example is we use a lot of language exchange on some of our pivoted in-person programs. And so having alumni from the experiment, from some of our US-based programs, from all across our portfolio, then come together into one digital program to support Spanish and English language exchange is really great to see. There's so much enthusiasm and folks that we can work with. And I'll pass it back over to Kristen to wrap us up here.
Thanks, Cal and Shadi. And I know we are at time or past time, so I'll just very briefly say we, this, as Cal said, it's sped up our long-term plan of growing our digital portfolio and building that into larger programming opportunities for our organization. So I think that's a COVID silver lining for us. We learned a lot really fast and we've gotten to do some really cool stuff with it. And we look forward to sort of continuing this pipeline of participants in digital exchanges, still then having an opportunity to study abroad and encouraging, whether it's in high school or in college, sort of down the line, how this digital experience can feed into that greater experience for our participants. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very exciting. And so many good ideas. I hope everybody was taking lots of good notes. I sure was. Really good ideas. So if you have questions for the World Learning Group, please throw them in the chat. And maybe we might have a couple minutes at the end to have a discussion about all this good stuff.